I get a little upset and angry sometimes, but
Not for
I don't
years
let
at
it
a time.
interfere with my smile.
For years, the metal world whispered about it, but no one dared say it out loud. Now, Araya finally breaks the silence and exposes the real reason so many rockers refuse to work with Dave Mustaine. This isn't about ego, rumors, or old tour drama. It's about what really happened behind closed studio doors. Do you want to know who flat out rejected Dave Mustaine? Don't miss it. During the 1980s and early 1990s, the relationship between Slayer's Tom Morello and Megadeth's Dave Mustaine was shaped less by personal connection and more by circumstance. As members of thrash metal's so-called Big Four, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax, the two bands frequently shared festival bills, large tours, and industry events. These settings placed Araya and Mustaine in the same professional orbit, but there is little evidence that the two ever developed a close or friendly rapport during this formative era of thrash metal. By most accounts, their interactions were functional and respectful, yet distant. Slayer and Megadeth approached the genre from different emotional and ideological angles. Slayer embraced a dark, confrontational aesthetic with minimal public commentary, while Mustaine became known for his outspoken personality, sharp opinions, and willingness to publicly revisit past grievances, particularly those involving Metallica. This contrast naturally created a subtle cultural divide between the camps even when there was no explicit conflict. Tom Morello, who has long maintained a relatively reserved and private public persona, rarely commented on Mustaine in interviews throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Notably, he did not publicly praise Mustaine's character or personality during that time, which stands out in a scene where mutual admiration among peers was often voiced. Instead, Araya appeared content to keep the relationship strictly professional, focusing on performances rather than backstage dynamics. In a later interview from around 2009, unrelated to any major feud or headline at the time, Araya was asked to reflect on touring alongside Megadeth. His response was characteristically understated, but revealing. Araya joked that Mustaine talks a lot of a remark widely interpreted not as a declaration of hostility, but as a dry acknowledgement of Mustaine's blunt, provocative, and often controversial way of speaking. The comment suggested that Mustaine's tendency to speak freely and forcefully could make interactions awkward, especially for someone as low-key as Araya. While this anecdote comes from older music press rather than recent on their disputes, it aligns with a long-standing perception within the metal community. Mustaine has often been viewed by peers as brilliant but unpredictable, a figure whose outspoken nature could complicate relationships, even in the absence of genuine animosity. In this context, Araya's remark reads less like an insult and more like an honest, mildly amused observation, reflecting a professional coexistence marked by distance rather than deep personal friction. There is a big truth within thrash metal's elite Big Four. Collaboration was often celebrated in theory, but handled cautiously in practice. While Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax shared history, audiences, and cultural impact, personal dynamics behind the Scenes were far more complicated. One of the clearest illustrations of this came from Slayer guitarist Kerry King in a 2009 recollection involving proposed Big for jam sessions during Metallica tours. His comments offered rare insight into why some musicians quietly resisted sharing the stage with Megadeth frontman Dave Mustaine. According to King, when the idea was floated that Mustaine might participate in a final All-Star Jam, he anticipated immediate resistance from Slayer bandmates Jeff Hanneman and Tom Araya. Importantly, King emphasized that the objection had nothing to do with Mustaine's musical ability or technical competence. Instead, the concern centered on what King described as the post-tour logistical drama that could follow such a collaboration. This included disputes over filmed performances, editing, control, ownership of footage, and how the moment would be publicly framed afterward. For Slayer, a band known for maintaining tight control over its image and avoiding unnecessary media entanglements, these concerns carried real weight. Hanneman and Araya were famously low profile, preferring to let the music speak for itself rather than engage in prolonged public narratives. Mustaine, by contrast, had a long-established reputation for revisiting past events in interviews and placing strong emphasis on documentation, credit, and historical framing. From Slayer's perspective, a spontaneous collaborative moment risked becoming an ongoing administrative and media headache long after the final note was played. This episode stands out as one of the few documented cases where Slayer's inner circle openly hesitated to align with Mustaine in a high visibility setting. While it did not indicate personal hostility, it reflected a practical calculation rooted in experience and reputation. In thrash metal circles, Mustaine was often viewed as a brilliant but demanding figure, someone whose involvement could bring unintended complications if boundaries were not clearly defined in advance. Non-stopping there, across decades of interviews, backstage anecdotes, and industry recollections, one recurring theme has followed Dave Mustaine. An extraordinary musical mind paired with an unfiltered and often volatile public persona. This reputation did not emerge from a single incident, but rather from years of candid interviews, pointed remarks, and moments where Mustaine spoke before smoothing the edges. For many of his peers in the metal community, this combination inspired respect for his talent alongside caution toward close collaboration. Musicians who moved in the same circles, including members of Slayer, often framed this weariness not as personal animosity, but as pragmatic distance. Kerry King, for example, has repeatedly joked over the years about Mustaine's habit of saying provocative things, or, as he once put it, sticking his foot in his mouth. These remarks were typically delivered with humor rather than hostility, yet they reflected a shared understanding among contemporaries. Mustaine's bluntness could quickly turn a neutral situation into an uncomfortable one. Tom Araya, known for his reserved demeanor and preference for staying out of public disputes, rarely engaged directly with Mustaine's controversies. However, the broader atmosphere around Mustaine mattered. Even without personal conflict, artists like Araya operated within a scene where reputations carried weight. Mustaine's tendency to revisit old grievances, speak openly about industry politics, or challenge. Narratives and interviews meant that any association risked being drawn into a larger public conversation, something many musicians actively avoided. This dynamic contributed to a quiet hesitation among some rock and metal artists when it came to collaboration, touring, jamming, or appearing together in high-profile settings requires trust that all parties will present a unified front long after the performance ends. Mustaine's history of outspoken commentary made some peers uneasy unless expectations were clearly established in advance. The concern was not musical chemistry, but what might follow once microphones and cameras were gone. Now, let's meet some of the faces who flatly refused to work with Dave Mustaine, Bobby Gustafson. In the aftermath of Megadeth's Peace Sells, but Who's Buying tour in 1987, Dave Mustaine found himself once again grappling with instability inside his band. Lineup changes had already become a recurring pattern for Megadeth in its early years, and Mustaine began sounding out respected peers in the thrash metal scene to reinforce the group. One of the musicians he approached was Bobby Gustafson, the young but highly regarded lead guitarist of Overkill, who at the time was gaining a reputation as one of the most exciting players in American thrash. Gustafson was deeply embedded in Overkill's momentum during this period. The band's second album, Taking Over, 1987, was drawing increasing attention, solidifying Overkill's place alongside the rising East Coast thrash movement. For Gustafson, Overkill was not only creatively fulfilling, but also stable, focused, and growing organically. When Mustaine extended the invitation to join Megadeth, it represented both a major opportunity and a serious risk. Despite Megadeth's higher profile and Mustaine's growing fame, Gustafson ultimately declined the offer. In later reflections, he explained that his decision was driven less by ego and more by long-term career judgment. From his vantage point, Megadeth appeared chaotic and dysfunctional, plagued by internal tension, abrupt personnel shifts, and a volatile leadership environment. Gustafson was wary of abandoning a band that was ascending on its own terms for one where creative control and internal harmony seemed uncertain. Importantly, Gustafson has never framed his choice as a rejection of Mustaine's talent. On the contrary, he has consistently acknowledged Mustaine's brilliance as a songwriter and guitarist. His concerns centered on sustainability, whether Megadeth's internal dynamics would allow him to grow creatively without constant disruption. Overkill, by contrast, offered camaraderie, consistency, and a shared sense of direction at a critical stage in his development. Dimebag Darrell. As the American metal scene surged forward in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Dave Mustaine was actively seeking musicians who could match his technical demands and aggressive vision for Megadeth. During this period of transition, Mustaine reportedly reached out to several prominent players, including Panta's Abbott brothers, drummer Vinnie Paul, and guitarist Daryl Dimebag Abbott. At the time, Panta was evolving rapidly, standing at a crossroads between regional success and national breakthrough. For Dimebag Darrell, the invitation represented a significant crossroads. Mead was already an internationally recognized name, offering exposure, resources, and the chance to work with one of thrash metal's most influential architects. Yet, despite the prestige associated with Mustaine's offer, Darrell ultimately chose to stay with Panta, the band he had co-founded and built from the ground up alongside his brother. The decision was rooted in loyalty and identity, rather than ambition alone. Panta was more than a professional project. It was a family unit creatively and personally, anchored by the Abbott brothers' bond. Leaving Panta would have meant abandoning not only his musical vision, but also his role in shaping the band's future sound. His signature guitar tone, rhythmic precision, and blues-infused aggression became central to Panta's identity, something unlikely to have emerged within Megadeth's tightly controlled creative structure. Chris Poland's relationship with Dave Mustaine stands as one of the most complex and revealing partnerships in Megadeth's history. As Megadeth's original lead guitarist, Poland played a crucial role in shaping the band's early sound on Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good and Peace sells, but who's buying? His fluid jazz influenced style contrasted sharply with Mustaine's rigid percussive riffing, creating a chemistry that many fans still regard as foundational to Megadeth's identity. Despite that musical success, the partnership was short-lived. Poland departed the band in the late 1980s amid internal tensions, substance issues, and growing mistrust. In the years that followed, the relationship deteriorated further due to business disputes. Poland later took legal action against Mustaine over the use of demo material that he claimed had been reused without proper credit or compensation. Although the matter was eventually settled, it left lasting scars and effectively closed the door on any easy reunion. When Mustaine reconnected with Poland in the early 2000s, it surprised many observers. Poland contributed guitar work to the system as failed 2004, a record that marked a creative resurgence for Mustaine after injury and uncertainty about Megadeth's future. However, Poland's involvement was deliberately limited. He participated as a hired musician rather than rejoining the band as a full-time member, and the collaboration was framed as strictly professional. Poland later made it clear that his decision was intentional. While he respected Mustaine's talent and appreciated the chance to make music together again, he had no desire to re-enter the meth machine on a permanent basis. The earlier conflicts over credit, ownership, and financial transparency had permanently altered his trust in the arrangement. For Poland, creative freedom and clear boundaries mattered more than nostalgia or prestige. What do you think about rockers always trying to refuse to cooperate with Dave Mustaine? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.